Peter Parker has had it rough the past few months, moving away with his wife only to be brought back to New York. But with the return of his greatest foe, Norman Osborn, things have gotten even crazier. With the loss of his brother and daughter, Peter Parker and his wife Mary Jane must cope with their losses. Between their return to college, Norman Osborn, the Stacy family, new gangs, ninjas, and the Trapster, will they rise above it all or crack under the weight? Welcome to the Forgotten Era, where we'll answer all those questions and more. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Forgotten Era podcast. It's me, Ethan, as always, and I'm joined by Matthew.
Here against my will, unfortunately.
Don't tell the police.
I just want to play with my Switch.
This is obviously a more classic episode of the podcast. We haven't had one of those in a while, of just Matthew and me. It's probably been 5 months since the last time that we just had the two of us, which is
I
pretty
think the
crazy.
Craven issue. The
Yeah.
Craven, I think that was the last one.
So that
Yeah, that
was
was
at
back in
least
May.
like 4 months ago. So
Mm-hmm.
pretty crazy. But today we're back with Amazing Spider-Man, our main book. And we're dealing with the return of Doctor Octopus. Ooh. Ooh. Yeah. This is an interesting story. To establish where we currently are, let's highlight where Ock is at this point. So, the Clone Saga, right? We all know what that is. Um, in the Clone Saga, there was a story called Web of Death, wherein Peter Parker was dying, and Otto Octavius was the one who decided to cure him because Otto is such he's so full of himself that he cannot let anybody else kill Spider-Man except for him. So he puts in all this work. There's this very dramatic bit of Peter going through his floating heads of guilt and fighting to survive. Also, Otto can cure him. Otto now knows his identity, and but seemingly will not use it against him. He's not interested in using it as leverage. He wants the fair fight against his greatest foe. But the mysterious Kane could not stand for that, so he fucking killed him. And that's where we are. So Ock's been dead in publication for about 3 years, a little under 3 years. And now we have this story written by Tom DeFalco to bring him back as part of the uh, status quo restoration that this era is very known for better, for worse. So, on that, is there anything you'd like to add before we actually get into the titles?
I mean, we kind of lightly touched on, this is the second time something like this has happened. There's the whole island arc earlier in early in Amazing Spider-Man with Hammerhead and all that. Um, this is this is like you said, this is an interesting arc. We kind of dealt with Craven coming back and that whole thing in a way, that whole thing, and now we're dealing with Ock, and it really does kind of hammer home this unfortunate thing that comic books have, where every time they do something interesting and fun, we got to go back to the status quo for better or worse. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's for the worse. I, for one, will never complain about them going back to classic Ock. I know a lot of people when he came back from Superior, the second Superior run, when he had the clone body, um, that they didn't like that when he made the deal with Mephisto. But I'll take classic Ock any over another Spider-Man running around. We got so many of them right now. But I mean, I guess we'll just get into it. So I'll hand it back to you.
Cool. Well, as I said, this is a story within the pages of Amazing Spider-Man. So we've got Amazing Spider-Man numbers 426 through 428. Starting with 426, we have Only the Evil Return. Released on July 9th of 1997, written by Tom DeFalco, pencils by Steve Scroce, inks by Bud LaRosa, and colors by Bob Sharon. The creative team stays consistent throughout these three issues, so I'm not going to be saying those anymore. So, the cover of this book is actually pretty darn cool, wouldn't you say? We have a nice action shot, as always, of any good cover, with tentacles coming from the beyond. And we got Stunner and a ninja and Delilah. Of course, Delilah with her horrible headpiece. I don't know. I don't like the headpiece. It's
It makes
very
her look.
ugly.
It makes her look like a Star Wars expanded universe character. Something you would see in like Shadows of the Empire.
She's like Buzz Lightyear, but with a
Yeah, yeah,
ponytail.
yeah.
So, but I like the gross Spidey on this cover. It's very good, very good. Alrighty, so I guess recap time. Deep in the night, Peter Parker has an intense nightmare of Otto Octavius rising from his grave. Peter wakes up from the nightmare in a cold sweat as his wife Mary Jane checks on his well-being. MJ deduces that the nightmare was because of the news of Otto's body being stolen from the cemetery. MJ tries to comfort him, saying Otto is long dead, but Pete knows that didn't stop Norman Osborn. In the streets of the city, our favorite Clone Saga tentacle lady, Carolyn Trainer, is out looking for whoever stole Ock's body. Over at the No Bull meatpacking warehouse, the Rose and Delilah are meeting with Master Zay of the True Believers. In order to revive Otto, they need a sacrifice, and thankfully, Rose knows just the candidate. Later, Carolyn visits Angelina Bronco, the woman known as her alter ego Stunner. Angelina is hooked back up to her VR matrix, willing to become Stunner once more to save Otto's life. Spidey is out looking for Otto too and comes across one of his usual pigeons, Louis. Peter interrogates him a bit, and Louis mentions the Lady Octopus who questioned him earlier. Back with Carolyn, she finds the remains of the master programmer from Virtual Mortality and Cyber War. The MP has data she needs that is thankfully intact. Carolyn's goal is to use the info from the master programmer to reboot Ock's mind if he is able to be revived. In therapy, Mary Jane admits to craving a cigarette again. Her therapist, Dr. Rondeau, believes it's either nicotine in her system or just a mask to hide something else. MJ then asks if the doctor believes someone can come back from the dead. Cutting to the Aegean Sea, we find Allison Mongrain. She's been attempting to reach Norman Osborn for some time as her funds are running low. If he doesn't get back to her soon, she may be forced to lend her inside information to the Parkers. Carolyn and Stunner find the warehouse where Otto is and are attacked by a group of Ninja and Delilah. Spidey pops in too to join the fight, and the Rose proposes a temporary alliance with Carolyn and Stunner. Pete is drugged by a throwing star and strapped down. He's going to be the sacrifice to revive Otto. And that's the end of this issue. So to start, I want to say that this is another wildly kind of inconsistent book from Mr. Scroce. Like he's just the master of like really cool panels and then really ugly faces. Like
Yes.
I love this Ditko Spider-Man that he draws.
He nails the eyes really well.
Yeah, and I like the flashback panel of Peter like thinking back to the old days.
Mm.
And he just does it so well. Like just the way that you can tell like yeah, that's 60s Spider-Man.
Well, I mean, it's a lot of his pages. Like there's the one where he's diving down and everything, and he's in shadow. He does shadow scenes really well, and I'm glad he, especially in these three issues, that he does that kind of stuff a lot. but like especially like the scene where the opening splash page, or not splash page, but opening page where it's Peter jumping out of bed and you got Spider-Man as the shadow, juxtaposed to Peter and everything. That kind of stuff I like that he does, but like you said, his faces are god awful. There is something that I will say, kind of jumping ahead. Have you noticed his women with their eyes? How he I guess he tries to draw their eyes closed, but it ends up coming off as like they have black pitless eyes. It's none of his male characters, but all of his female characters. MJ has it in this book. All the other characters that she's hanging out with. They all have it, and I don't know why he does it. I don't know if it's a coloring thing or if it's something he does. I'm not super familiar with his work outside of this era, um, or outside of this book. But like it I don't know. It's weird.
I do like the inclusion of having Stunner and Carolyn back in the fray. It's
Yeah.
another thing of like remnants of the Clone Saga not forgotten. Stunner is a character that really isn't used a lot at all in her history.
No, I mean the last time she showed up was it Superior? Yeah, she hasn't showed up since
Mm,
2012.
I think
No, no,
2013. No,
it was
2013 would be when that was published because that was
2013.
issue like 21 or something.
Yeah, that was after he switched costumes, so that would have been 2013. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So it's definitely been a while. But I always thought she was a bit of an interesting character. And that's Clone Saga bias, but also I think the tragedy is there for her for sure. And
she. Okay, I'm sorry.
oh no, you go ahead.
No, I'm just saying she's definitely like a good love interest for Ox. She's probably. I like Anna Marie, and I like what they did. Say what you will about Slot. I think Slot is one of, if not the best, auto writer. It really depends how I'm feeling that day, but like she is probably my preferred love interest for him. She's a very, I don't know, I, like a nice foil, I guess, to him, or a nice equal to him. She has her problems. She's emotionally damaged. Her weight she sees as an issue. She's been made fun of. It's a lot of these similar things that Otto has, and you can, she genuinely cares about him, which you don't see for a lot of villains. A lot of villains, it's like when they have relationships, a lot of it can be like the Harley Quinn kind of stuff that's going on, like it went on with like Joker back in the day. But like, it's a genuine nice thing to see. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Carolyn showing up. I mean, we have our clone biases, but Carolyn's a cool character. She's always been cool, in my opinion. And if we can have 40 different symbiotes and 40 different goblins and all this stuff, I don't see why we can't have different plays on Spidey's second biggest villain, in Doc Ock.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's nice that Carolyn is still used to this day.
yeah.
But now she's visually no longer herself. She turned into Liv from Spider-Verse for the sake of movie synergy.
Hmm.
But at least she's still there.
Yeah,
But
the core concept is still there.
yeah, this issue also brings back Allison Mongrain. She will be a big part, a big cutaway till the end of the series. Um, in Gathering of Five / final chapter. So it's interesting to see what she'll be up to because she really doesn't do a whole lot, but she's in a lot of the issues. And it's just kind of the same story for her over and over again. Like, is Norman going to get to me? Is Norman going to get to me? I got to run
Hmm.
away from him, blah, blah, blah. But again, another not forgotten piece of revelations there.
Well, I mean, this whole issue with her and everything with the whole cat is basically a slap in the face
Yeah.
if you're following that baby storyline. Which, I mean, if you were reading at this time, the baby storyline is one of the biggest things that you're constantly asking because you're dangling the keys in front of the reader the whole
Well, yeah,
time.
well, this is the start of it because this isn't even like we haven't seen her since you know since Spider-Man 75. So with this being the first seed and we see a crib with a cat in it, it's like, oh god, yeah, where's the baby? And then we just keep getting more and more as it goes on, but we'll get there when we get there. But overall, I would say this is a pretty okay issue. It's nothing like spectacular, ha ha ha, or amazing. Um, but it's a solid like 6.5. It's above average, but
I
I
would
like
give
the
it a
characters in there, so
I would give it a 6. It's not offensive. It's not, but like reading it, nothing out of it wows me and everything.
yeah,
And the voice of it definitely feels different. I guess the way DeFalco's so used to writing, the voice of it kind of feels a little different than the other books. Or maybe just my memory of the other books right now are fading me. I am running off of a little bit of sleep, but yeah, I mean, solid 6.
cool. So, moving on, we have Amazing Spider-Man number 427 with a triple gatefold cover. Or I guess not triple gatefold, but it's a gatefold with a back cover and an homage to Amazing Spider-Man 55 there by Steve Scroce, and then the back cover part was done by John Romita Jr., and then the flip out gatefold was done by John Romita Sr. So it's just a whole amalgamation of different styles here.
And that senior one looks so good.
Yeah,
Like,
the reflection of the mask being peeled off is great.
mhm.
But yeah, the JR one is very strange because it looks nothing like Doc Ock, and then the the Ramita Senior one is just perfect. With the colors by Liquid, it's so weird in this era seeing the digital coloring on Ramita Senior's work, but
Yeah, I like that kind of coloring on him.
yeah,
I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. I like '90s Romita Senior. I wish he did more work on Spider-Man because I actually think that his big eyes, he does the big eyes perfect.
yeah, no,
Um,
it's really good. I
so,
very much agree, especially with the later covers and Spectacular and whatnot.
oh yeah.
All really, really great stuff. Alrighty, so Amazing Spider-Man number 427, Sacrifice Play, was published August 13th, 1997. We open up on Stunner as she recaps her past. A girl bullied all her life for being shy and overweight, destined to die alone until she met Otto Octavius, the love of her life, the light of hope. And now she's willing to do anything to have him back. In the warehouse, the resurrection ceremony begins. Carolyn and Stunner don't trust the rest of the lot, but Carolyn assures that she has her own plan for how the ceremony will go. Deep within the recesses of the spiritual, Peter comes face to face with his mind, facing the demented spirit of Doc Ock, as well as May and Ben, who encourage him to fight for his life. He sees Mary Jane and knows he cannot let her down. Just then, Harry Osborn as the Goblin comes in to help Peter escape Otto's grasp. Not for good, but just to assure that Norman can be the one to kill Peter in the end. The faces of his loved ones leads Peter to break free of the chains, both physical and spiritual, and begins beating up the ninjas. Stunner tries to stop Spidey, but he gets out of the warehouse. She agrees to take Pete's place and be the sacrifice. Meanwhile, Pete goes up against Delilah and other ninjas atop the warehouse. At New York's Plaza Hotel, Madame Qua reveals that her brother Zay is the one leading the resurrection of Otto. It's all part of Black Tarantula's plan to defeat the Rose. Chesbro is then sent to investigate another matter for Black Tarantula's personal mission. Angelina prepares herself for the sacrifice, recapping more of her and Otto's history. Their dates, him gifting her the VR Matrix, his love for her, etc. She straps in, and Carolyn assures her that she will not die. The fools don't know that her construct is VR, and she can disconnect when she wants. High above, the battle between Spidey and Delilah continues. Their fight is moved to a vent, a more confined space where Delilah rules. Back down in the ceremony, something is going wrong. Carolyn activates her switch as Stunner and Zay's bodies disintegrate. Stunner's VR headset explodes, and she screams in agony. As Spidey finishes knocking out Delilah, the ground beneath him crumbles, revealing the return of Doctor Octopus. So he's back. The art here is super gnarly. I really dig the dream sequence. I think that was done really well, and I kind of like. We want to talk about the soulless dark eyes. Definitely played out here on purpose
Mhm.
for like May and Ben. But I don't know. I it's a really nice issue visually. That giant auto demon is terrifying, and it does its job to be disgusting. I
I mean,
his goblin's a little like bobbleheady, but meh. Oh well.
yeah, well, I think that's a problem that he has to begin with. I think he makes Spider-Man a little bobbleheady at times.
Yeah.
I mean, so does Ringo, uh, in a way. But I mean, that's coming from a guy who's not a big fan of scrawny Spider-Man.
That's fair.
Um, I just you go from John Romita Jr. where he's this hulking man of iron into Scroce, and he looks like Ultimate Spider-Man. Um, but I mean, I mean, we're talking about the art and everything. This is probably the best out of the three issues.
Yeah.
The dream sequence is the best part of the issue in my opinion. The fight scene in the air duct is really fun because I always like it in Spider-Man comics when he's he's got his back up against the wall, but then like he's getting the shit kicked out of him, but then all of a sudden he's just like, oh yeah, I've been taking these punches and feigning all this, like I'm just saving my strength because you know you guys drugged me, and then he takes him out in one blow. It really does kind of, I like when they do that whole thing of like, oh yeah, he's super powerful. We as a fan, as Spider-Man fans, we kind of get a lot of flack because we're very much just like the Batman fans are like he can beat anybody if he does X Y Z. But it ends up being true half the time. Um, but I mean, the whole thing with like the sacrifice is kind of it's goofy, but I mean I have a problem with it, and the whole thing with like we were talking off mic. The I find it funny that this is an Ox story about him being resurrected, and we have a device that has his memory and backup on, and then what? 15 years later, we get into Superior with the Octobots and everything. Hey, oh yeah, and speaking of which, we had in Superior, we had a whole thing in the Mind Space where his peers' dead relatives try to help him beat, Ock and everything. So like, it's kind of funny to see how some things history repeats itself.
For sure. Um, I will also say that this issue, something I forgot to add in the recap, this is the introduction of Mary Jane's professor, Marina, who is being stalked by Chesbro. So I
I wonder
mentioned
who.
his little mission, but this is what he was sent to do.
I wonder who we're excited.
Yeah, I wonder. Who knows? We'll never know. But yeah, I also really liked that duck scene. It's a well done book overall. The action is really fluid. There's really great shadow and shading work, like we said about last issue. Some haunting imagery that really works, and you kind of feel the gravity of the situation
Well,
through the art.
there's the one thing that I like that he does in the page where it's reminiscent. I know it comes out like 20 years later, but of like the PS4 games where he runs up the wall and then you see the momentum as he shoots up over the ledge and
Hmm.
everything on page 8. My only big criticism with this issue is the Scarlet Spider jab. Um, I know at this point at the in the history of the comics that costume is not considered iconic yet, but to sit there and be like, oh, here's a slightly used Scarlet Spider costume and empty web shooters. It's in hockey we have this whole term of when a bad trade happens, like, oh well, they basically gave him a bag of pucks, and basically means the same thing. It's useless, and that's kind of shitty. Uh, but like, I don't know. We're in the era where everything clone has to get talked down because we got to be like, hey, we're listening to you. We hate the clone stuff too, even though a lot of these writers are, currently going around right now being like, yo, we loved Ben. You know what I mean? So it's it's kind of disheartening 30 years later.
Yeah, it's just part of reading the books as what they were in the moment, and you know,
It does in a weird way. This is probably gonna be a controversial take. It does in a weird way kind of make you appreciate what's going on with the character right now as far as Ben, because I would rather him, if they're gonna do something with him, do something, I guess. I'd rather take that than them fucking being like, oh, the character's worse than trash. I don't know. It's complicated, I guess. So, but
yeah, I get what you're saying. There are moments where it's just like it's hard to read something without the hindsight of thinking about, you know, the past, or foresight of thinking about like what's coming out now.
what
But
we're at now.
yeah, but I don't know. This is overall a pretty good issue. I think it kind of falls in the same category, like a 6.5 or 7. So
I- I'm gonna give it a 7.5. This was an actually enjoyable issue. The pacing is solid. There's not a lot of you know there's not a lot of stoppage, which the next issue has a lot of problems with, where we're jumping all over the goddamn place and trying to get so much information, and then towards the end of the book, it's like, well, what does this have to do with anything? It's a solid 7.5 for me.
yeah, not a bad one at all. And yeah, now we get to the longest 23 pages I've read in a while, because wow, this one feels very long. So here we go. Amazing Spider-Man number 428, Living Large, was published on September 10th, 1997. The battle against Doc Ock rages on, literally, as Otto attacks Peter with his full fury. Obviously, having no recollection of his death at the hands of Kane or Peter's identity, Otto holds no punches against his foe. Peter is frantically trying to avoid Otto's attacks while saving a very ungrateful little girl. All the while, it's even more evident that Ock has reverted back to his default setting by speaking as an intellectual Shakespearean villain. We cut to the Rose and Carolyn recapping and worrying about their partners before heading to see what MJ is up to. Her and her friends, Jill and Chantel, find a flyer for a toga party and make plans to go that night. Back with Spidey, he straight up steals a car to drive through Otto's destruction. It's quickly totaled and was totally a waste of time for the book. Delilah wakes back up and flees the scene. At the Daily Bugle, Robbie Robertson informs Jonah about Spidey and Ock's brawl. Jonah is not interested, though, as he has other things to worry about. Norman Osborn has recently purchased the Bugle in Spectacular Spider-Man and has caused a lot of ethical conflict for the staff, including Robbie. Jonah tells him just to do whatever he feels is right. In the city, the long, underlined, bold fight just keeps going. Ock has a force field supplied to him by Carolyn, which makes Pete's blows worthless. Eventually, Ock decides to take his leave and collapses a building on a group of civilians. Pete, of course, saves them. At home, Peter takes a nice bath but beats himself up about Otto's escape. MJ's fed up with the self pity and decides to go alone to the party. Pete realizes he's been a dick and joins MJ at the party. Now cutting to the Plaza Hotel, Qua mourns the loss of her brother Zay and informs Black Tarantula that Otto has escaped. BT plans on striking back at the Rose in revenge of Zay, while Chesbro takes a silly jetpack for his secret mission. Ock visits Carolyn's lab to find Angelina beaten and bloody. The explosion of her VR matrix has nearly killed her, and he'll have his revenge on Spider Man for her pain. At the toga party, Jill and Chantel are color swapped, which makes reading quickly confusing. MJ goes off to party with Chantel as Jill sticks back to dance with Peter. Delilah is visited by the Black Tarantula as a warning to the Rose. He kills her, revives her, then slams her through a brick wall, making a spider as the impact. At the Bugle, Jacob Conover is asked to come back and work. We sure are focusing a lot on him recently, huh? The book finally ends with Peter being introduced to MJ's Professor Marina and the creepy Chesbro watching the college party from a distance. I know that from the recap, you really don't feel like it's that long, but reading this was honestly a little tiring, especially reading it and having to take notes with how much they go back and forth from the fight to something else, to the fight to something else, the fight to something else. And the fight just goes on, and honestly, the set piece, like the background of the fight, is not interesting. It's all this yellowish brown brick color, and it all is messy and covered in dust, and it all blends together. It's just not the Spidey bits and the Ock bits, like the action of them just fighting, and that's all the panel is. It's really well done. I like specifically this one page. It's page 11 on the digital version I'm reading, where they're doing the classic, like Peter's moving super fast and he's jumping around and he's dodging and all this stuff, and it just looks really nice there. But I don't know, it just felt very long to me while reading it. There's a lot going on, and it doesn't feel super balanced because it's like Otto and Peter are having this super intense fight, and then he's just like, I'm gonna leave now. We've been here long enough. We gotta do something else. And then we have to cut back and do this toga party, and we have to see what happens to Delilah, and we have to have Jacob Conover, and we have to have the Bugle, and this and that, and yeah. So not dreadful, but very draining.
Yeah, it's very tiresome. I mean, the fight and everything. There's, like you said, there's some bits that I enjoy. Like I actually enjoy the car scene where he's ramming into the arms and everything. I enjoy that, but everything else is a little boring. Well, I shouldn't say boring. It's a standard fight, you
Yeah.
know, and there's nothing really out of like extraordinary in it other than the car and him using the dumpster to catch the debris. That's a cool thing. But I mean, other than that, um, there's really not nothing that like stands out. The coloring, like you said, you have these tans, these yellows, and then you have the green and yellow of Doc Ock up against all this, and then Spider Man. But like for whatever reason, having Ock up against those you know earthy colors and everything, it's really kind of gnarly on your eyes. Um, and it's not a problem with the art; it's just the setting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, like I know we've given Scroce his lumps, but these last three issues, he has not been the problem. Um, and as much of a big fan of DeFalco I am, this definitely was a scripting issue and not a penciling issue. Um, I can't really put a lot of blame on him for or Scrooge for any problems I have. The whole toga party thing at the end, while I like MJ kind of pulling Peter out of his self pity because he needs that as a character, I think the character needs somebody to ground him because otherwise you get too far into that woe is me, I'm Peter, I'm going to be miserable my whole life, and that's something that for whatever reason, writers think that they think we can relate to it, but that's not what we relate to the character for. That it's his perseverance. You know what I mean? And when he's down, he can pick himself up, kind of thing. But it's nice to know that he has somebody that, um, when he is feeling shitty, he can't exactly like pick himself up because he's tired or whatever. She's able to come along and be like, all right, whatever, you do your thing, and him realize, hey, I'm being an asshole. Because when you're in a long term relationship, whether you're married or a long term relationship or whatever, you'll have moments like that where you're feeling angry and bitter, and then you kind of snap at a person, or you feel like not doing anything, and then it's like, oh, I'm being a dickhead, and that's I like that. Now the whole I will say that I actually like the tarantula fighting Delilah. I like him the whole page where he's slamming her head against the wall and he's making the spider logo, which evidently makes the fucking Ditko
Yeah.
Spider-Man logo, um, which I think is pretty cool, honestly. But that I think is a really cool. So I really like that part of the story.
Well,
But then the whole
I like that we get to see, like, we've had this build up for Black Tarantula, but we get to see him in action. We get to see why he's feared and why he's a big deal and why his presence in New York is something to be concerned about, especially with, murdering and then reviving someone somehow immediately. That's pretty interesting.
Mhm.
It just goes to show that he's not to be fucked with.
And then he stunts on her by saying his name in her speech pattern.
Yeah. He stole her thing.
Hmm.
I will say, I'm pretty sure we've mentioned it before in other episodes, I'm sure. But it really that I love a lot of Peter and Mary Jane moments throughout this time period. But I do get very sick and tired of they have to fight nearly every issue. They have to have some sort of, or not even like a fight, but just some sort of petty disagreement, or her friends have to make an offhand remark about Peter not being a good husband or not being there. And Mary Jane tries to defend him and then just kind of not gives in to the pressure, but just doesn't do enough because obviously she can't tell them he's Spider-Man, but it just gets to be kind of annoying when it's every appearance of Mary Jane is like these loving, beautiful, tender moments contrasted with, oh, now they have to have their argument because we're trying to make them divorce.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people. I mean, not every writer, but not every writer knows how to write a married couple well, I guess. I mean, you could make the argument as a writer of like, well, there's a lot of married couples that when they go through what Peter and MJ have gone through with losing a child, that the relationship does kind of fall apart, and there is a lot of that bickering and everything. You could make that argument. I think me being fine with that bathtub scene is a little bit to do with like the fact that like we're reading these so spaced out that I'm not
Yeah.
really thinking about it like that. But like when you put it in context of, yeah, we're flip flopping from them having sweet moments and say fucking Peter Parker, and then you go into Amazing and it's people being, having an argument. It's ultimately down the line, it's because, hey, we need to make Spider-Man relatable again, and these kids don't relate to the marriage. It does kind of get on your nerves, um, and it really makes you kind of like, I guess, kind of get bummed out a little bit because we know where it's ending up. Nah, I'm not talking about One More Day. I'm talking about other attempts before One More Day that'll come soon later on. But yeah, when you put it in that context, I have to back up and agree with you on that. That's You see, that's why it's good to have a discussion, because I would have gone on and just been like, yeah, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, no, it's just something that I've always noticed about this time period where there are always moments where I'm like, wow, this is the perfect Mary Jane and Peter moment. And then it's followed up with petty bickering. But like you said, sometimes in relationships that is what happens, but it just gets to be a little bit tiresome. And I also can't the soulless eye things that you talk about with the women is so prevalent on the last like 2 pages of this issue. It drives me
Mm.
crazy. On top of the fact that somehow Jill, Stacy, and Chantel got like color swapped because Jill is drawn as like
Darker, yeah.
as like a black woman, and
Mm.
then Chantel is given uh like Jill's color palette, except with blonde hair. So
Mm.
just a interesting mistake, but I guess that happens with colorists sometimes.
I mean, it happens when you draw all your women in ponytails, and you know they're bound to, and when you're a colorist looking at something, you don't. I don't know. The other thing that kind of bugged me with this issue was Peter going off to dance with somebody while his wife
Yeah,
won.
they're trying so hard to push Jill Stacy still at this point, and it
Uh-huh.
only gets worse.
It does. I mean, it's. I mean, I know for a fact if I went off and I danced with another girl, even if like she was a friend, well, yeah, even if she was like a friend of mine, unless it was like for a wedding or something, and you know how like, you get paired with somebody for a wedding on like
Yeah.
the if you're a groomsman, you have a bridesmaid, and you might have to do a dance with them. But if other than that, I'd probably be in a lot of trouble if I went to a party and was dancing with somebody else. But it did I think we're kind of also skipping over probably one of the biggest status quo changes in this whole thing is Osborne buying the Bugle. When
Yeah.
you hear people talk about this era, this is the one of the biggest things that they will bring up. And it later down the line, honestly, one of my favorite stories from this era, from probably you know Norman Peter stories of all
Peter
time,
Parker
is
95.
how'd you know? But I mean, I love that story. That story is so good.
Perfect.
Like you know, so this is kind of that start of it, and I actually like this status quo change. I like them bringing in, oh god, what's his face, the guy we saw earlier. He puts his foot on Robbie's desk when he
Oh,
showed up
Jacob
earlier.
Conover.
Yeah. Um, like you start bringing stuff in and everything because
Yeah,
a lot of times
Norman's bringing back all the problematic people. He's trying to
yes.
make this hard on purpose because of what the bugle means to specifically Peter,
Mhm.
and just to just to fuck with him.
Mhm.
And we'll get more into it when we cover more of Spectacular because that's the series that this happens in. Um, that's one of the issues with doing like these story arcs like this is sometimes things are jumbled because of how they're released. But I do like that this is our first look on the podcast of that whole story because it really does open up a lot of doors and it's very interesting for Flash's character as we'll soon learn. And it's very
Mhm.
interesting for everybody just to see how that happens. And then of course we lead to Peter Parker 95, which is one of the best books of this entire time span.
I think
So,
it's one of the most underrated Spider-Man comics ever. I think it gets lost in this. It's kind of like when you talk about like some of the most underrated stories in the history of the character. A lot of people, including myself, will say stuff like Lost Years and stuff like that. The 95 is one of those books where it's just
it's all
fun.
about 88 and 95 for those good Peter Norman stories, man.
Yep.
Thank you,
One.
Mackie.
Well, I
But
mean, we joke about Mackie and everything, and we we kind I think in last episode we kind of gave you a little bit of a razzing because you love Mackie and everything. But I mean, genuinely, I say this with full love. Peter Parker is the best book, hands down. It's and it helps that you have Junior at his peak. But Mackey's stuff is fun. It's interesting. You'll have those little issues like the one we did last issue with the cat and everything, or last episode with the cat and everything. That's a little weird, but I mean, it's really this is I miss this era of I shouldn't say I miss this era of Spider-Man. I miss this time, this marketing of Spider-Man, where we had all these satellite books, and you could have a bad, amazing Spider-Man because this is a I wouldn't say this is bad, but it's not great.
It's
But then
it's
you can go,
under it's below like the par.
yes,
Like
it's
what you expect amazing to be is what I would say Spectacular is at this point. Because
yes,
Spectacular is really the book that's progressing things forward at this time. And Amazing, DeFalco and Co. are just kind of doing their thing, coasting.
hmm
Um, and then Peter Parker is the great supplement book. So then Peter Parker becomes what Spectacular once was, which is the secondary title. And then Amazing becomes the new adjectiveless where it's just kind of doing its own thing. And then Sensational is just having
it's the
fun
web,
doing whatever the fuck it wants on the side, because
yeah.
the beauty of what Peter Parker and Spectacular are is they focus on Norman Osborn,
hmm
because Norman is mentioned in Amazing quite a bit, but he doesn't show up in it nearly at all until the end.
Well, I'm fine with him not showing up because I mean, there's one thing that I've always liked about Norman is, you know, a character who had been dead for what 20 something years, and every time he would be brought up in the book, there's this overarching dread for a character that's dead, but he was such a good villain at the time, so I kind of like that he gets mentioned, but because what he is, you don't need to see him to be like, oh shit, Norman. Well, damn, this is bad. But
It
like
just
it,
feels a little unfair for the main Spider-Man title to be
yeah.
so disconnected from the core of what's going on
Well,
in a way.
I'm sure Tom would argue, hey, we brought back Doc Ock. That needed to be done, which is to Amazing's credit. If you were going to bring Doc Ock back from the dead, yes, you do it in Amazing. You don't
Right.
do it in Peter Parker. You don't do it. You can bring Craven back. I'm sorry, like I know Craven has his fans, but the best thing that Craven ever did was shoot himself in the damn head. I mean, James DeMatteis took a character that nobody cared about. I mean, everybody's heard the spiel if you're listening to this show. He took a character that nobody cared about, wrote a story that was a lot of people consider arguably the best Spider-Man story ever made, depending on who you ask, and you know made this masterpiece. And then people were like, "Oh, well, now I want to mess with Craven." And Doc Ock's different from that. Doc Ock is, if I've always heard, and I kind of agree with this analogy, Norman Osborn is Peter Parker's greatest enemy, but Spider-Man's greatest enemy is Doc Ock. And I've always kind of agreed with that because, and I know some people argue, well, Doc Ock took that place after Superior because yeah, Doc Norman killed Gwen, but what's worse, killing your girlfriend or killing the actual character, So, but that's a debate for another time. But like, I do agree. You bring Ock back, you do it in Amazing, but like this whole story is just it kind of reminds me of the how Spencer gets rid of Sin's past, where it's like the ends justify the means. Like you're not enjoying this story, but hey, at least we got fucking rid of Sin's past.
Yeah, it's just you if you were going to bring Doc Ock back, this is such a strange way to do it. There's so many weird, like, nuanced things and technical things, and the master programmer from those two wonderful stories that nobody likes
Hmm.
is such a integral part, especially if you read Unlimited 18. So it, it's just it's it sucks because I feel like Ock at the point where he died in the Clone Saga was at such a perfect spot for his character to have that all be erased for us to have the Ditko Stan Lee version back does more harm than good, especially because after this, we don't see Ock again for a long while.
Nope.
So it's years until we see Doc Ock again in the pages of Spider-Man.
Uh, God, when does he show up then? JMS run, right?
Yeah, that would be JMS run when he's kidnapped
When
by
he's
that dude,
Yeah, that. I mean, that story's all right. I've never been a big fan of it, but it's all right.
Lobster Man.
Oh, sorry, I just sat down and I forgot to put my thing on mic mute. um, I mean, that's the sad thing about Ock is, every time they bring him back, they bring him back to this status quo of like you said, the Ditko Lee version, where the modern version of is the die is cast kind of thing, and it's a shame that he gets shafted twice because you had the whole thing in Superior, the second volume of Superior, where he has all this character development, and even in the first Superior, he has all this character development, and then they whisk it away into and then make him the Ditko Lee Doc Ock again. And some decent stories have come out of it. I mean, I liked the whole when he fights Ben and Beyond, and I liked the when Peter has to wear the arms and everything to fight him recently. Those are okay stories and everything, but like I'm kind of the opinion of like you shouldn't go back to status quo unless there's a story you really, really, really want to tell with that version of the character. If the character's in a good place, how they are, and the fandom is fine with it, then don't touch it. And as much as I wasn't a fan of, them throwing around 40,000 different Spider-Men, even though I'm a huge Ben fan, and I love Miles and I love Miguel. I would rather him be have character development in that run than be pushed back to normal. And it's kind of the same thing with here, where it's like you bring them back and you don't do anything with them. And I know we're kind of jumping the gun with stories we haven't covered yet, but these books are 30 years old. It, I don't know, because I feel like with Norman, like every time Norman comes back, they at least do something with him. You know what I mean? Or am I off the mark? Because at least with Norman, when they bring him back into the book, even though he doesn't die, but when they bring him back into the book, they at least try to do something. Whether it's we're gonna make him a good guy now, or we're gonna put him in the Thunderbolts, or something like that.
Yeah, the
So
only time that it really didn't feel that way was in like the like Spencer run. He felt very like,
Mhm.
derivative until his sins were removed, and then things changed. Um, but yeah, overall, I mean, you do say they do things that are interesting with Norman. I mean, like putting him in charge of the Avengers is an interesting thing to do, and I think that what they do with Norman, even if it is a little repeaty, because there's a lot of like Norman disappears, he comes back, he's good in the public image, but he's evil behind the
Mhm.
scenes, and that is kind of his thing and always will be his thing. But they do it in a way that feels different enough that it's not just rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, like it feels with Doc Ock a lot of the times. Because with Doc Ock, it's almost frustrating. I say almost. It is frustrating to me, at least, that he's become such a parody of himself after having great stories written, like Superior
Mhm.
Spider-Man, like Ends of the Earth, like stuff like that that are just interesting stories for him coming to terms with how things are and taking advantage of what's presented to him, to then be reverted back to, darn you, Spider-Man, I shall crush you with my arms. It just gets to be a little old.
I mean, you're right. It does. It's one of those like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Because like
Yeah.
any time I see a solicitation of like Doc Ock is back, I'm like, fuck yeah, let's go. I'm always down for a Doc Ock. I mean, Doc Ock's my second favorite villain. I'm a Norman guy, you know, Doc Ock, and then you know, I always make the argument that Venom isn't necessarily is less of a Spider-Man villain now than a lot of other characters. He hasn't been a villain for Spider-Man in almost my half my life. But what was I gonna say? It it's very nice that we can kind of compare these two characters because I mean, if you think about the history of Ock up to this point, you have these, like you said, he ended off in like this really good spot because even before like Funeral for an Octopus and Web of Death and all that stuff, you had like Unlimited issue 3 and all that, which is arguably the most talked about book in that out of Unlimited because of what it does with Ock. You know what I mean? What it shows and everything, his past and all that. But then you go into you kill him off, you wait 3 years, you bring him back, and then you don't do anything until JMS is just like, let's use Doc Ock. And then you have some stuff like you have Year 1, which was all right and everything. Was it Year 1? Yeah,
Chapter
Year 1,
1.
Chapter 1. Yeah, Chapter 1. The mini series, the that they did, um, which was all right, but I don't know. It's Doc Ock is one of those characters where he I don't know. He's always going to be in a weird place, and then they'll do something good with him every 5 years. It seems like if they're not rehashing Superior, which seems to be the thing that they do nowadays. It's either we get Dick Code Ock or we get Superior. There's no in between.
Yeah. I feel like the most in between we've gotten is Beyond, because he felt a lot like the kind of Clone Saga Doc Ock, where he was very collected and he knew what he wanted and he was
Yeah,
headstrong in what he was going to get. But yeah,
I mean, I
we,
love that. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say we didn't put a number on this one. I will say, um, it gets another 6.5. So I'm kind of just like 6.5 across the board for this specific issue or for this specific
I'm
story.
gonna go 5. Down the
Okay.
middle. Five doesn't mean it's bad. Five just means it's down the middle. There's just as good. There's just as good amount of good stuff as there is bad stuff. I think it's equally down the middle as far as this whole thing goes, and I I wish this book was better, honestly. So,
It's okay. We're getting to the better stuff.
oh yeah, this is the lull before the big pickup. But I mean, you never want amazing. Which this is funny to say in the era we live in, but you never want amazing to be a bad book, and this is kind of
Yeah, it's just very mid, as the kids would say. And it kind of just I say we're getting to the better stuff, but it kind of just stays that way until, identity crisis and whatnot. Because I wouldn't count like single issues as part of stories like Spider Hunt. I can't say that makes amazing better because it's just a single issue.
Mhm.
But You know what? We'll cross the bridge when we get there.
Yeah, which that is a bridge I cannot wait to cross.
Yeah. So, what we have coming up next, everybody, is going to be a doozy. We're going to have mutant prejudice and picketing and silver ladies and John Romita Jr. artwork next time. So, stay tuned for that. Do you have any departing words for the people?
Um, so before we're recording this episode, we are currently as a fandom awaiting the. We're in yet another state of are we getting Ben Riley back? So that's the anxiety I feel as a fan right now. It's kind of weird. Um, so if you are like us and you're fellow Ben fans, stay strong. They can't hurt us more than they already have. Um, so just get ready for them to
Be
beat the
prepared
shit
for
out of you.
disappointment.
Yeah, I'm not ready. I mean, the second we saw that Black Cat preview with the web shooters on the outside, it's just like, oh God, here we go.
Well, in that book comes out first. It's released before the story starts in Amazing, so it might be a little spoilery if it does turn out to be like that. But I guess we'll have to see in August what
So
happens there.
if it is Ben, does that mean you and me got to buy another Spider-Man figure and then put the web shooters on the outside and be like, well, it's a Ben costume, so it's got to
I'm,
be a Ben.
I'm absolutely not going to do that.
Oh, I will. I 100% will.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't bring myself to care all that much sometimes,
I feel
but
you.
it'll be interesting. However, they decide to go with it. I will also say that we are currently trying to make plans for a couple different things for the show. Um, one being possible interviews for the 20th episode. I did a 10th episode special with the Tom Lyle thing. So I was hoping for the 20th we could possibly get someone on. Who that is, we have no idea. Just gonna try to get who we can get with the help of Mr. Zach Joyner, who has a lot more connections than we do. As well as in October, so there's still some time. We're going to be doing a one off episode about the Clone Saga, about the first half of the Clone Saga, because at that point, everything from Power and Responsibility to Cyber War will have turned 30 years old. So we can cap it there, cover that, and then if we're still doing this in 2026, in October of 2026, we can do the back end. So for the Clone fans, stay tuned for that. That one's going to be super fun. Of course, Matthew's going to be on that one. I plan on having Brad back on that one as well. And probably Zach. It might be a stacked episode. There might be a lot of people here. Um, just because we all love the Clone Saga. And I feel like we should just have everybody we can as part of that. So,
Spread the love, man.
yep. So, of course, you can find us on social media. I am at Batchirimuro, and Project Rescan will be there, not used in this episode. But if you'd like to check out the books I've done, go for it. That's all I'm going to say about it.
I mean, like I said, I don't usually do a lot, but if you want to follow me, I'm at disgruntled Philly sports fan on Twitter, and then on Instagram, I'm Flyers guy 67. Um, but yeah, I don't really post a whole lot. So
Alrighty, well, thank you to everyone who decided to listen to us this time. We greatly appreciate everyone who shows support and lets me know, typically through DMs, that you enjoy the show. But thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed, and if you liked these books, let me know. If you didn't like these books, also let me know, and we'll catch you next time because we're not going anywhere.
wait, we forgot to say this. John Semper Jr., please call us.
Yeah,
I know you're.
I'm John simping my junior right now for him to come on here.
I know you're not. You should come on the show, buddy, because I know you're not busy. You're not.
You should come
You
on my back.
I don't know about that, man. Hold on, John. Look at me. Look at me in the eyes right now. You and me, we have a connection right now. Okay, I'm gonna paint a picture for you. Imagine you're on a beach. I funded the beach for you. You sit down. I say, "Hey, John, how did what did you do to make like Spider-Man who he is today?" Because I don't know if you know this, John, but the symbiote saga was completely different before you glazed all over it. So anyway, I know you're not doing anything because you're not writing the Spider-Man comics, so please come on and fight us in a death battle,
Cage
please.
match.
With cage matches. No, I'm kidding. I love the '90s show,
I
kind of.
love I love some of it.
Yeah, you lost me when you made Electro the Red Skull's kid. First season is pretty cool though, so you got that. The toys, I grew up with the toys. That was pretty cool. So yeah,
All right,
I had
well, that was a weird tangent at the end.
it,
See
it had.
everybody.
Bye.